only to release the solute. And by release the solute, I mean, remember we said you've got a solution of salt and water that is being combined, and therefore you want to separate that solution. Remember, a solution is when there's a mixture of two or more substances and they then become one thing. Now, in your solution, when you want to separate that, you cannot separate that using your hands. You cannot separate that through sieving. So there's other means of separation. We spoke about evaporation. We spoke about distillation. I am mentioning those because they're related in terms of evaporate the water solution by boiling it. As you boil the water solution, what happens the water will then change from liquid state into gas state. It will boil until such an extent wherein the solution that granules of salt is going to be your solute because those are solid. So now we said the only function of distillation is for those purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not correct. The function of distillation is for that, to give you the solute, which is going to remain from the solution of salt and water, but also it is to purify the water. What do I mean by that? I said to you, if we are using a Liebeck condenser, what happens is where the beaker where in the solution was, as it boils, that evaporation gas will then travel through the tube. As it travels through the tube, it will then change the gas state, changing it into water droplets. Ladies and gentlemen, we've seen this before. If you take a kettle and you boil water, the steam goes to the lid of the kettle. But if you open that lid, you realize that that gas has changed into water droplets. Now, if you have a solution of salt and water, what then happens is that those gas particles that are going to make their way through the beaker all the way into the tube, they are then going to be purified. There will be no salt in them. Remember, because the salt would have remained where? In that beaker. So basically, when we are distilling water, we are doing two things. We are doing it because we get travel all the way through that tube, and then those water droplets will then become what? They will become liquid, and that liquid will be purified water without the salt. So that is, we've got question number B as well, where the answer there was false. I'm assuming that we got those correct. In question number 2, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to have a bit of a more focus on question number 2. We then gave you materials on the left. We then said you need to then decide by ticking how you separate those two materials. We had a sugar solution. How do you separate a sugar solution, ladies and gentlemen? Number 1, you evaporate. Absolutely. Remember, the sugar solution is similar to the salt solution. So in separating, much the same method. So if evaporation is going to work, definitely distillation is going to work. Will chromatography work? Ladies and gentlemen, absolutely no. Why will chromatography not work? Because chromatography only applies when we want to find out what a secondary color is made up of. If we want to find the mixtures of primary colors that have made a secondary color, remember we said, when you've got a secondary color like black, it's made up of 3 primary colors, ladies and gentlemen. And now, if you use chromatology, what do? You take a droplet of black, you put it onto a filter paper, then you apply a bit of water, then the black starts to separate into the 3 primary colors that it's made up of. So now, when I'm talking about black being a color, also dye speaks to things that are colors. So it means that when we want to separate colors of a dye, maybe that color would be black. We then also use chromatography, ladies and gentlemen. So those were our activity, from the previous
나래도.
Their mutual song. Their mutual song.
Mute this. Stop. What's going on? What? Stop.
Shut up, boys. Mutual mom.
And then
All right, welcome guys. Let me apologize for that. I seem to have had a network challenge there. I'm assuming it's because of the weather. Ladies and gentlemen, let me not waste any more of your time. Let me look at the lesson objectives for today. Just in case you are not aware, this is Natural Sciences, grade 7. I see we have grown from 25 participants to 54. That is absolutely amazing. So what is it that we're doing today, ladies and gentlemen? Number 1, we are going to look at taste buds. Number 2, we are going to look at the pH scale. Number 3, we are going to do acids. Number 4, we are doing bases. And number 5, we are doing neutrals. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to have a look at the chat box to see if we remember any of these things. By remember, I'm saying we've done these in some of the grades, particularly grade 6. We touched on this a bit. And for all of us that are actually in grade 7, natural sciences, we are going to do this also in technology. There is a topic that speaks about taste buds. So this is also such a great way to move us into that. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Theory, for removing those people. Ladies and gentlemen, we will not tolerate vulgar in this channel. Remember, all of us are here to learn. We are assisting each other so that we can be able to make the most of this very difficult situation. So if you are being vulgar or you are being disruptive, we do not have a choice but to remove you. And the sad reality is once we remove you, you will not be able to make your way back here. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's work well together. Thank you so much. Welcome, Tabiseng. We are very glad to have you here. All right, so those are the 5 lesson objectives that we are doing today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move right along without wasting any more time. So I just want you to think about the following questions in terms of the lesson objectives or what it is that we are doing today. So number 1, one of the easiest questions, of course, what is it that we use for tasting? What do we test with? When we want to taste something, what do we use? Question number 2, do you know what the pH scale is? There are some adverts on television that speak about the pH scale. Sometimes when we buy still water, that is of course packaged from our local supermarkets, there are pH ratings that are given to that. So what is that? Do we remember what that is? Question number 3, can you give one example of each of the following: an acid, a base, or a neutral substance that we use in our homes? Can you give any examples of those? Let me have a look at the chat box to find out. Yes, thank you so much. So I'm assuming that you remember some of the things that are there. Thank you so much. All right, let us move right along. So if you do not remember any of this, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a train smash. It's the reason why we are here today. All right. So point number one, or rather the first slide, Bokang, I acknowledge you. I will respond to you immediately after the first slide. Thank you so much. Please reserve your question. All right, tastes of substances. So remember I had asked you a question. I said, what is the organ that we use for testing? What is it that we use? So the answer is very simple. It is the tongue. And obviously, ladies and gentlemen, because we are human beings, we are going to solely focus on the human tongue that is used obviously for tasting. If you remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we started working together, we spoke about the 7 life processes that living things go through. And one of the characteristics of living things was sensing, or the sensory element. Now, the tongue is used also as a way of sensing. Why is this? This is because, ladies and gentlemen, when the organ, which is the tongue, tastes something, when you want to taste if something is sweet or sour, what happens is that the tongue is the organ that sends all that information to the brain to tell it what it is exactly that you are actually tasting. Now we are talking about taste buds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome all the way to, thank you so much for joining us. I see Chanel is also here. I've never met them. Thank you so much for joining us. We are happy. The more the merrier, of course. Now, all these taste buds that we're talking about, where are they found? Ladies and gentlemen, we find these at the top. We find these on the sides of our tongues, and sometimes we find them underneath. You will realize that there is a lot of taste buds that are found in the human tongue. So in essence, ladies and gentlemen, they are found everywhere and anywhere in the human tongue. Remember, I said our focus is the human tongue. That is the objective of today's lesson, right? Now, these taste buds allow us to be able to taste different types of things. Number one, to taste whether something is salty, to taste whether something is sour, bitter, or sweet. So ladies and gentlemen, those 4 types of tasting mechanisms, they are all allocated in our tongue. Remember, I had said these are found at the top, on the sides, as well as underneath. Of course, we are going to go through this to say, where is it that actually each and every one of them is found? Let me have a look at the chat box. There are some questions that are there. Welcome, Olutu. Oh, sorry about that, Olutu. Thank you so much. All right, Joseph, noted, we will do. Thank you so much. Yes, the tongue has got taste buds, Ranzu, absolutely. So that's what we are doing. Sensitivity to the environment. In a lot of instances, Naledi, that is the case with a lot of animals. To say, is an environment, if you think about snakes, remember? So snakes use their tongue so that they can be able to sense the environment. But in our case, it's not necessarily the case. Whether something is salty, sour, bitter, or of course, sweet. Of course, you've got the occasional instances where the tongue tells you something is hot, and that's never a good thing. All right, let's move on. So ladies and gentlemen, here's what I've done. So I've put a picture there. I'm just moving my cursor. The picture that I've put is a picture of a tongue of a human being. Now, there are certain regions or areas of that tongue that speaks to different types of taste areas or taste buds. So ladies and gentlemen, let me start with the one that's at the top. So that would be the coffee there. So that would be a bitter taste. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, if you put in a lot of sugar in your coffee, of course, that taste, which was bitter initially, will then change, apologies, into the second type of taste, which is what? The sweetness, right? So now I've done 2 things there. So right at the top, that's the bitter taste. I've put in an example of coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, there are other examples that are there. These are just some common examples that I put in so that we can be able to remember. Like I said, in the same coffee, if we put in a lot of sugar, we then will find that the taste will change and it will become sweet. Those are chocolates, those are sweets. I took a bit of a container and I put my sugar. So this would be one of the examples that are homemade that we use each and every day. So then we've got another taste area, which is sour. So that's found on both the left and the right sides of our tongues, right? So they're not found at the top, they're not found at the bottom. They're found on the left and the right sides. So that would be the sour taste. I'll put in an example of a lemon, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a real life lemon that I took out from my fridge. So ladies and gentlemen, I think we are realizing that this lesson is a lesson that's every day. These are things that we experience. These are things that we taste and eat in our daily lives. So we've got another example, which is salt. So obviously that would be the salty taste. We've been using salt a lot as an example, particularly when we were studying solutions and mixtures. So salt is also a great example, ladies and gentlemen, there it is. So those are the tongue taste areas or the taste buds. I want to have a look at the chat box so that I can be able to respond. All right, Asma, the tongue is an organ, and the tongue is the organ that has got taste buds. All right. Olwetu, can you please just confirm, is your video still disabled? Is it still giving you a problem? All right, Kiandra, remember these lessons are going to be uploaded on YouTube. So you are more than allowed to have a look at them if you felt that there was a point that was important, a point that you missed. Okay, I see Olwetu is back. Thank you so much. I'm glad that the video has been enabled again. So ladies and gentlemen, just to recap, this is the tongue. The tongue has got taste bud or taste areas. We've got the bitter taste right at the top there. And that there's an example, which is coffee. We've got the salty area or region. There is an example, which is, of course, salt. We've got the sweet region, ironically, or rather very interestingly enough, just above the salty. So you've got two very contrasting things, a very nice, what do they call this, figure of speech there in English. So the sweetness is right above the salt. There's an example, which is your chocolate and sweets. We've got the sour taste, which is found on the left and, of course, the right-hand side of our tongue. And we've got a great example there, which is the lemon. So ladies and gentlemen, there it is. So those are the tongue, and those are our taste buds and some of the examples in terms of how everything works. I want to move on now to the next part of the objectives of this lesson. Now, I want us to speak about the pH scale. And obviously, in speaking about the pH scale, we want to actually say what is it and what does it do? So ladies and gentlemen, the pH scale is used to measure how strong or how weak an acid and a base as well as a neutral are. All these things that I'm speaking about, ladies and gentlemen, you might not know right now, but by the end of this lesson, the aim is for you to know all of them. So the pH scale is simply meant to measure how strong an acid or a base is, and of course a neutral. There, a neutral is not really mentioned, and we'll see why as we go further into explaining those things. But now let's look at the technicalities of how the pH scale works. Remember, when we speak about a scale in mathematics, we are largely speaking about numbers. So obviously we are expecting your zeros, your ones, your tens, etc. And that's exactly the case here, because we are scaling something. What does it mean? It means that you're grouping certain things into one group because they are similar in some extent. So the first thing is your acids. Where do we find our acids on the pH scale? Ladies and gentlemen, acids on our pH scale are found on the left-hand side. I'm just moving the cursor there, right at 0. So basically, from 0 to 6, ladies and gentlemen, any substance, when you test using the pH scale, that will go from 0 to 6 is an acidic substance. I will repeat myself, from 0 to 6, ladies and gentlemen, any substance that is found there is acidic in nature. Likewise, if a substance is far from 6, meaning that from 0, 1, 2, 3, that substance is very, very strong in the amount of acid that it is. As it begins to go from your 5, 6, then it starts to lose a certain strength of acidity. So from 0, that is the strongest acid that you can find, to 6, that is the weakest type of acid that you can find. And many acids in our homes that we consume are around 6. All right, then we've got what we call a base. Ladies and gentlemen, what is a base? Before I go to base, for the purposes of understanding and chronology or order in our lesson, so from 0 to 6, those are acids. So from 0, that's the strongest. From 6, that's the weakest type of acid. Now, I don't want to go to bases because I want us to deal with 7. Now, 7 is the neutral. Neutral, ladies and gentlemen, if your mom or your dad, they are driving or they are parking the car and they put the car on neutral. Again, I'm assuming that the car is not automatic, it's a manual, a gearing, steering type of a car. Manual means that the car is not on gear 1, 2, 3, it's not on any gear. Yeah, I'm very, very worried myself, but we shall continue. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we ended at neutral, and we said neutral is at number 7, meaning that it's neither a base nor is it an acid. So it's right there in the middle. So we go to the base. What are we talking about when we talk about bases? So from bases, we are saying they begin from 8 to 14, right? So those are bases from 8 to 14. So those are bases. So what does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? It means that from 1 to 6, that's your acid. 7, only 7, because that's the neutral, that will be your neutral. From 8 to 14, that will be your base. Ladies and gentlemen, I keep on talking about acids, I keep on talking about bases and neutrals, but what is it exactly that I'm talking about when I'm speaking about all these things? We are going to examine that, and we're going to use household examples. So I want to just respond to a couple of questions or concerns. Toto, you are correct. The base has got the same understanding as an alkaline. However, there is a bit of a, what do they call this? There's a bit of a gist to that. We'll explore that in the next slide. Shelley, I will try to speak a bit slower and of course a bit louder so that you can hear me more. All right, okay. Let me apologize again, ladies and gentlemen. Let me do my best with these remaining minutes. Okay, so acid, we know something is an acid. The first thing is that the taste of that is very sour. The feel, remember we taste with our tongues. The feel in terms of touching it, it feels very rough, number 2. The third thing is that it's very corrosive. What does it mean? It means that it's very dangerous. It can not going to go and speak much about those. The acid examples that we're going to speak about are ones that we use in our homes. So what are the properties? The taste is sour, the feel is very rough, and many acids, like we are saying, are very, very dangerous. Ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the examples that are there. So we've got citric acid, which is an example. We've also got what we call lactic acid. So those are the type of acids mainly that we find in our homes. So what are the properties or what are the characteristics? Properties and characteristics means how do they behave, how do they look, and how is it that they are. So that's just a fancy scientific term to say how does it behave and what does it have. All right, let me just have a look. Okay, so those are the properties of acids. Number 1, taste sour. Number 2, they feel very rough. Number 3, a caution or a very important aspect is that many acids, like I said, particularly that are found in science labs or experiments, are dangerous, they are corrosive. What does it mean? They can burn the skin and they can even kill you. So let's go to bases or alkalis. Someone asked earlier if alkalis are bases. Ladies and gentlemen, that's absolutely correct. So what are the properties of bases? They taste very bitter. Number 2, they feel very slippery. Number 3, which is also a cautionary measure, is that they can be dangerous and they can be able to hurt you to some extent. It's a solute because it dissolves so they are usually powder. How it feels on your hands. If you taste it, which I would not advise, of course, it tastes very, very bitter. Of course, when we talk about the bar soaps that we use to bath, that's also an example of that. That is a great example also of a base. Let me just have a look at the chat box to respond to some of the questions. Okay. I'm trying to read some of your questions so that I can be able to respond. Yes, Ranzu, that's a very, very good question. In our stomachs, ladies and gentlemen, we definitely have got acids, but these are good acids that assist us to break down food in terms of its organic matter. Remember, when you swallow something in its solid state, when it comes out of your body in terms of excretion, which we said is one form of the 7 life processes, what happens is that is broken down, and the acid in your body, in your stomach, assists you to do that. Very good question, Ranzu. Thank you so much. So we go to the next slide, which is neutrals. So what is it that we are talking about when we speak about neutrals? Remember, we first said, ladies and gentlemen, acids in terms of the pH scale, there is our pH scale, are starting from 0 to 6. So those are our acids, right? We then said, ladies and gentlemen, bases on the pH scale are found from 8 to 14, right? So now we want to go in terms of the neutrals. I want you to remember, we said neutrals are number 7 on the pH scale. They are neutrals, meaning that they are not acids, nor are they bases. So in essence, they're not taking any of those two. A great example of neutrals, ladies and gentlemen, is water. Water is a great example of neutral. If you put salt in water, it still remains a neutral. So if you add this into the water, it's still a neutral. If you add sugar as well, it still, ladies and gentlemen, becomes or remains as a neutral. So let us recap. We've got acids. The properties of this is that they are sour in terms of how they taste. They feel very, very rough. And we are saying we call alkalis. These are bitter in taste. They feel very slippery when you touch them. I made an example and I said to you, most soap products in any shape, in any form, are great examples of bases. They are bitter in taste. They're also slippery, ladies and gentlemen. Then we've got neutrals. These are not acids, nor are they bases. They are found on number 7 of our pH scale. A great example would be your water. So they are not taking anything. They are neutral. They do not fall under acids or bases. So before we go to the takeaway points, I just want to have a look at the chat box to see if we've got any questions that need me to respond to. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm merely seeing a lot of comments, which is good for interaction. So what is our takeaway point from today's lesson? Number 1 is that the tongue is an organ that, ladies and gentlemen, we use for taste. When we talk about taste buds, they are taste buds because they are meant to distinguish different types of tastes in substances or products which we expose to our tongue. What are those? That's the sweetness. Is something sour? Is something salty? Is something bitter? So we've got taste buds that are important in dealing with that. We then spoke about the pH scale. We said acid has a pH of 0 to 6. We said neutral is a pH only of 7 because it's in the middle. It does not fall under an acid or a base. We've got a base, which is of the pH number 8 all the way to 14. All right. So those are our takeaway points from today's lesson. Let me check if we've got any other questions before I move us to the next activity. Okay, I am trying to find the text box. There we are. Yes, remember I said to you, the saltiness as well as the sweetness are found literally at the tip of the tongue. They're almost next to each other. So that's absolutely correct. Akini is asking, why are some acids dangerous? Very good question. They are dangerous, Akini, because they are found right at the far end of the pH scale. So they are navigating between 0, 1, and 2. And I said those acids are like chlorophyll. So what, not chlorophyll, chloric acid. Those ones are dangerous. Why? Because they are found at the far end, 0, 1, 2, 3. So as a result, they are very, very dangerous in terms of they are, and they will be able to kill you. So that's why I'm saying they are usually found at the far end, 0, 1, 2, as well as sometimes 3. As you go to 4, 5, 6, they're not that dangerous. Those will be your lemons. Nothing will happen to you once you take those. Okay, So we want to talk about this activity. So we want you to explain the following. Number one, give two properties of the following acids. By properties, remember I said, how do they behave and how they are. So acids, remember we had a slide when I explained what acids were and what they were doing. Unfortunately, I will not be able to tell you now because I want you to remember and do research on your own. So what are the two properties of acids? What are the two properties of bases? And of course, question number 3, I want you to recommend to someone who wants to taste the acidity or the basicness, or if something is neutral, what can they do? What can they use? Should they use their hands, their legs? What is it that they can do? Recommend something. In the next lesson, ladies and gentlemen, we will actually be touching on that. So just to explain the activity, you explain the following: two properties of acids, two properties of bases, and then you recommend to a person who wants to determine or test if something is an acid, if something is a base, and if something is a neutral. Remember, in your responses, we want you to hashtag lockdown is schooling so that we can have as many other people joining us as possible. All right, so these are some of the links that we used. There are YouTube videos also that are found here. And remember what I was suggesting the previous time. Okay, I'm also just trying to, well done. Thank you so much, Yuji. I asked that people must take pictures. The pictures are going to assist us in terms of the activity. So maybe let me just go back to that. Try to take a picture, take a screenshot so that you can be able to use that to write the activity. And tomorrow when we come back, we then start with that and then we move into the next activity, of course, or lesson for the day. Okay, so what is it that we are doing tomorrow? Tomorrow we are investigating on acid-base indicators. We are going to talk about this. When we say there's something that is called acid-base indicators, what is it that we are speaking about? So tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we are doing. Thank you so much, Toto, that you enjoyed. I really, really appreciate that you learned something. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where you will find us in terms of the hashtags. Of course, like I say, the more we hashtag, the more many of our classmates and friends are able to also catch up and join us for our next lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Let me apologize for the network problems. Tomorrow and any other day, we will make sure that we improve. Let me look at the chat box one last time. Thank you so much, Bokang. You don't have to have money to pay me. You will only pay me once you get high marks. That is what I want. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow, same time, same place. My name is Alex Songo. Enjoy. Let us see each other tomorrow again at 3 p.m. for Natural Sciences, grade 7.